We've become dangerously dependent on a fragile food system, leaving our families vulnerable to empty shelves and rising prices. But the key to true food independence isn't a secret held by corporations. It's buried in your own backyard, locked within the forgotten wisdom of our ancestors. These 15 simple tricks are the blueprint to unlocking that power, turning any patch of dirt into a source of overwhelming abundance. The Three Sisters Guild. Long before laboratories and fertilizers, the earth itself held the secrets to an abundant harvest. For centuries, Native American farmers practiced a form of agricultural magic, a guild where three plants worked as one to create a feast from a single patch of soil. They called them the Three Sisters, an alliance that remains one of the most brilliant and productive planting strategies ever conceived, a lost blueprint for food security. First, the corn was planted, growing tall and strong to serve as a living trellis. A few weeks later, climbing beans were sown at its base. They would spiral their way up the sturdy corn stalks, reaching for sunlight they couldn't find on their own. But their most important work was happening unseen, underground. The beans pulled nitrogen from the air and fed it into the soil, providing essential nutrients for the hungry corn. Finally, squash was planted in the spaces between. Its massive, sprawling leaves created a living mulch, shading the ground to keep it cool and moist while its prickly vines discouraged pests. Each sister supported the others, eliminating the need for stakes, fertilizer, and weeding. It wasn't just a garden. It was a complete, self-sustaining ecosystem. This ancient wisdom shows how plants can cooperate above the surface, but another old-world secret reveals how to build a powerhouse of fertility that works for years, right beneath your feet. The buried wood trick. Imagine a garden bed that holds water like a sponge, makes its own fertilizer, and actually grows more fertile with each passing year, a vital skill in an age of depleted topsoil. This isn't a futuristic fantasy. It's an old-world European trick built on a foundation of what most people would consider trash. Known by its German name, Hügelkultur, or mound culture, this method creates the ultimate raised bed by first building a core of buried wood. The process began by layering rotting logs, fallen branches, twigs, and even cardboard directly on the ground. This woody heart was then covered with compost, grass clippings, and a final cap of rich topsoil. As the years passed, the magic underneath began to happen. The buried wood started to decay, transforming into a giant porous sponge that soaked up winter rains and held them deep within the mound. During the driest weeks of summer, this hidden reservoir would release moisture back to the plant's roots, making irrigation almost unnecessary. At the same time, that slow decomposition released a steady, decades-long supply of nutrients, creating a warm, incredibly fertile soil that produced shockingly healthy plants. It's a powerful technique for building fertility from the bottom up. But creating a mound isn't the only way to tap into the Earth's hidden potential. Another old method found that the secret to an explosive harvest wasn't in what you added, but in how deep you were willing to go. The deep soil secret. Modern gardens are often a surface-level affair, tilled only 6 inches deep. But intensive gardeners of the past knew that a plant's ambition lies in its roots, and the secret to unlocking a truly massive harvest was hidden a full 2 feet below the ground. This method, a testament to hard work and horticultural wisdom, was known as double digging. The process was laborious, but brilliant. A gardener would excavate the top foot of soil from a narrow trench, setting it aside. Then, they would take a spading fork and plunge it deep into the exposed subsoil, rocking it back and forth to break up the compacted clay and rock without ever turning the layer over. Once this hidden hardpan was shattered, the rich topsoil was returned. The result was a garden bed with 24 inches of loose, aerated, friable earth, a paradise for roots. Carrots could grow arrow-straight, potatoes could expand without resistance, and tomatoes could anchor themselves with a root system that made them virtually drought-proof. This deep foundation allowed for much denser planting, easily tripling the yield of a conventional bed. It was a one-time investment of sweat that paid dividends for years, proving the best work in a garden is often invisible. But once the soil was perfected, old-timers knew you could push certain crops even further with a simple tonic, a secret found not in the shed, but in the medicine cabinet. Grandma's Epsom Salt Elixir. Before garden centers were lined with colorful bags of specialized fertilizers, the secret to a bumper crop of peppers and tomatoes was a humble household remedy. It was a trick passed down through generations, an inexpensive elixir from the medicine cabinet that acted like a super vitamin for the summer garden. This secret weapon was nothing more than simple Epsom salt. Not a salt at all, but a naturally occurring mineral compound of magnesium and sulfate, it worked a subtle magic on plants. Magnesium is the absolute core of the chlorophyll molecule, the green pigment that allows a plant to turn sunlight into energy. A small dose of it was like tuning up a plant's engine, allowing it to photosynthesize at peak efficiency. For heavy-feeding plants like tomatoes and peppers, the results were stunning. Just 1 tablespoon dissolved in a gallon of water and applied monthly would result in darker, lusher leaves, more blossoms, and a dramatic increase in the amount of fruit. It also helped prevent the dreaded blossom end rot on tomatoes by aiding calcium uptake, ensuring a harvest that was not only abundant, but perfect. It was a perfect example of old-school wisdom, using a simple mineral to unlock a plant's hidden potential. But boosting a plant's internal engine was only half the battle. Another forgotten trick didn't add anything to the soil, but instead multiplied the most powerful force in the garden, the sun itself. The reflective wall of sunlight. In northern climates where the sun is a fleeting guest, old-world gardeners devised a way to trap its warmth and light long after the clouds rolled in. They didn't build glass houses, they turned a simple stone wall into a massive radiator and a mirror for the sunday. This technique allowed them to grow tender fruits and vegetables far outside their natural comfort zone. The method was as simple as it was brilliant. Sun-loving plants, like tomatoes or espaliered fruit trees, were planted along the base of a south-facing wall. All day long, the stone or brick would absorb the sun's energy, basking in its heat. Then, as the cool evening air arrived, the wall would slowly radiate that stored warmth back onto the plants, creating a gentle microclimate that could protect them from light frosts and extend the growing season by weeks. To amplify the effect, these walls were often painted or whitewashed. The bright, reflective surface would bounce sunlight back onto the shadowed parts of the plants, ensuring the leaves received light from all angles and the fruit ripened evenly and quickly. This bath of constant warmth and multiplied sunlight resulted in a harvest that was earlier, sweeter, and far more abundant. The art of sacrificial planting. In the endless battle between the gardener and the pest, the modern solution often comes from a spray bottle. But our ancestors practiced a far more elegant form of warfare, a clever deception where they invited the enemy in and offered them a feast, all to save the kingdom. This was the art of sacrificial planting, a strategy for a world drowning in pesticides. The strategy, also known as using a trap crop, was simple. If you knew a pest was coming for your prized vegetables, you would plant something they loved even more right beside them. Aphids, for instance, are notorious for attacking squash and bean plants. But if a border of bright, peppery nasturtiums is planted nearby, the aphids would swarm to them first, treating the flowers as a far more desirable banquet. In the same way, farmers would plant a perimeter of collard greens to lure the diamondback moth away from their valuable cabbage fields. The trap crop would absorb the primary assault, becoming a living shield that kept the main harvest pristine and untouched. It was a masterful use of nature's own preferences to protect a crop without a single drop of poison. It was a brilliant strategy of redirection, not annihilation, that ensured a bountiful harvest. But protecting your plants was just one challenge. An even greater trick was knowing how to multiply your most successful ones for free, using a potent, growth-inducing tonic brewed from a common tree. The Willow Water Growth Tonic. Long before rooting hormone was sold as a chemical powder, old-world gardeners had a free and endless supply of their own. They knew nature had already created the perfect growth tonic, a potent liquid brewed from the branches of one of the world's most common and resilient trees. The secret to multiplying their best plants was hidden in plain sight, within the weeping willow. For generations, gardeners observed that any willow branch that fell to the ground would sprout new roots wherever it touched moist soil. To harness this incredible life force, they would snip a handful of new, green twigs, cut them into small pieces, and soak them overnight in a bucket of water. By morning, the water was transformed. The willow had leached a powerful natural growth hormone into it, the very compound that signals a plant to send out new roots. This humble homemade tonic was a game changer for propagation. When a gardener took a cutting from their most prized tomato or rose bush, they would first stand it in a jar of willow water. Within days, the cutting would explode with a network of healthy new roots, ready for planting, turning one superior plant into an entire field of them. It was the ultimate form of garden recycling, using one plant's vigor to create dozens of others. But while making more plants was one path to a bigger harvest, a far stranger trick involved intentionally wounding them a strategic cut that seemed cruel, but would force the plant to produce a truly astonishing bounty. The counterintuitive cut. It goes against every instinct a gardener has. To take a pair of shears to a young, vibrant plant and snip off its main, growing tip. It feels like an act of sabotage. But seasoned growers knew this secret well, that sometimes the cruelest cut leads to the most abundant harvest. This technique, known as topping or pinching back, was a direct challenge to a plant's natural ambition. Most plants are programmed for what is called apical dominance, a hormonal command to grow tall and fast from a single central stem. But the moment that top shoot is removed, the command is broken. The plant, sensing a threat, immediately shifts its energy from growing upward to growing outward. It awakens the dormant buds along its sides, transforming its entire structure. A basil plant that is pinched back will split into two main stems. Pinch those, and they become four. A young pepper plant that is topped won't grow into a tall, spindly stalk, but will instead become a short, sturdy bush with dozens of branches, each one capable of producing its own flowers and fruit, dramatically multiplying the final yield. It was a masterful lesson in plant psychology, proving that a little stress at the right time can lead to incredible growth. But while this trick required careful, hands-on intervention, an equally revolutionary method promised a massive harvest by doing almost nothing at all, a technique that started by throwing away the tiller forever. The forgotten hay blanket. In the 1940s, a gardener named Ruth Stout decided to try something radical. She wasn't a scientist. She was a librarian in her 60s who got fed up with the backbreaking, senseless labor of tilling and decided to simply stop. Her neighbors thought she was lazy. Her garden thought she was a genius. Her technique was known as the deep mulch method. Instead of tilling, she simply maintained a thick, permanent blanket of hay over her entire garden, sometimes up to a foot deep. This layer of mulch was a miracle worker with three jobs. First, it smothered any potential weeds, which couldn't find the light needed to grow. Second, it acted like a sponge, soaking up rain and drastically reducing the need for watering. But its most important function was building soil. The bottom of the hay blanket was constantly decomposing, attracting earthworms and creating a layer of rich, black humus right on the surface. To plant, she would simply pull back a section of hay, drop in a seed, and cover it back up. Her plants thrived, their roots diving into the moist, fertile earth without any competition. It was a gardener's dream, a way to achieve abundance through patient observation rather than brute force. But not every path to a bigger harvest is so gentle. The next trick requires a difficult, almost heartbreaking decision that is the only way to turn a crowded row of seedlings into a harvest of giants. Thinning for giants. There is an act in gardening that feels like a betrayal. The first time you do it, you feel like a monster, choosing a survivor, carefully plucking dozens of healthy, vibrant seedlings from the soil and tossing them aside. But this single, ruthless decision is the secret to unlocking the true potential hidden in the earth. When small seeds like carrots or beets are sown, they sprout in a thick, crowded line, a miniature forest where every plant is an enemy. Left alone, they wage a silent, underground war for sunlight, water, and nutrients, a battle with no victors. So they practice thinning. With a steady hand, they would select the strongest seedlings and remove all the others. When I pulled a carrot the size of my forearm out of the ground that fall, I understood the sacrifice. A crowded row might produce 100 tiny roots, while a thinned row would yield 30 giants, magnifying the total weight of the harvest tenfold. It was a tough lesson in garden mathematics. Less is often more. Once the strongest plants were chosen, the goal was to feed them, and for that, gardeners turned to a legendary, foul-smelling brew, a liquid superfood for the soil. The power of Comfrey tea. Every old homestead had a corner of the garden you learned to avoid. It was the home of the stink bucket, a dark primordial soup with a smell of swampy earth and bitter decay that would make your eyes water. But to a tomato plant, it smelled like a feast. This foul brew was one of the most potent liquid fertilizers known to gardeners. The main ingredient was comfrey, a plant with an extraordinary talent. Its roots could tunnel down 10 feet or more, drawing up valuable minerals like potassium. Gardeners would harvest these nutrient-packed leaves, chop them roughly, and leave them to steep in a bucket of water for several weeks. The resulting tea was electrifying. The high dose of potassium acted as a direct signal for the plant to produce more flowers and, consequently, more fruit. For tomatoes, peppers, and squash, a weekly drink meant the difference between a good harvest and a legendary one, with plants groaning under the weight of their own produce. It was proof that the most powerful growth tonics weren't bought in a store, but were brewed from the earth itself. But not all plants crave the same kind of help. For the humble potato, the secret to a triple harvest wasn't in what you fed it, but in how you buried it. The potato trench multiplier. The humble potato holds a secret. A single seed potato has the potential to produce a massive 20-pound harvest, yet most gardeners only ever see a fraction of that. The key to unlocking its full potential wasn't found in special fertilizers, but in the simple act of burying the plant as it grew. Old-timers understood a critical fact. The potatoes we eat are not roots, but modified stems called tubers, and they only form in complete darkness. So, they would dig a trench about a foot deep and place the seed potato at the very bottom. As the green stalk grew, they would return every few weeks and gently bury it again with soil or straw. This process, known as hilling, continued all summer. Picture a cross-section of the soil. Instead of one layer of potatoes, you see a vertical stack, a hidden skyscraper of a harvest. Each time the stem was covered, it was a signal for the plant to send out a new layer of tubers from the buried nodes. It was a simple, elegant trick that worked with the plant's nature to easily quadruple a harvest. But once you've grown the perfect potato, how do you ensure you can grow it again, only even better? For that, gardeners turned to a form of living magic, an art that transformed a good harvest into a genetic legacy. The seed-saving superstrain today. A garden begins with a trip to the store and a packet of seeds produced hundreds of miles away. But for our ancestors, a garden began with the final act of the previous season. They didn't just grow food, they became architects of life itself, creating their own unique superstrains of vegetables. The art of seed saving was a discipline of careful observation. The gardener would identify the champions, the single tomato plant heaviest with fruit, the bean vine that showed no disease. This wasn't just for free seeds, it was a deliberate act of genetic selection. This was an act of defiance against a world of identical corporate seeds. It was food independence. Each year, by saving seeds only from the best, they were tailoring the plants to their own specific garden. Over a decade, a generic seed would evolve into a family heirloom, a perfectly adapted variety that produced a far more reliable crop than anything sold in a catalog. It was the slowest but most powerful trick of all, a partnership with nature that paid back with generations of abundance. But having the perfect seed was only half the battle. For the ultimate advantage, farmers believed you had to sow it at the perfect time, guided not by a calendar on the wall, but by the one in the night sky. Moon planting wisdom. For millennia, farmers and gardeners looked to the sky, not just for signs of rain, but for a more subtle signal from the heavens. This wasn't superstition. It was a belief that the moon, in its silent, steady cycles, held sway over the very seeds they placed in the soil. This was the practice of planting by the moon. The logic, passed down through generations and printed in farmers' almanacs for centuries, was tied to the moon's gravitational pull. Just as the moon governs the ocean's tides, it was believed to affect the subtle water table in the earth, drawing moisture closer to the surface. The 2 weeks between the new moon and the full moon, known as the waxing phase, were considered the best time to plant crops that bear their fruit above ground, like tomatoes and beans. The growing moonlight and upward pull on the water were thought to encourage vigorous leaf and stem growth. Conversely, the 2 weeks of the waning moon were for planting root crops. With diminishing light and a force that pulled energy downward, potatoes, carrots, and beets would be encouraged to focus on forming large, healthy roots. It was a way of synchronizing the gardener's hand with the rhythms of the cosmos for the best possible start. But no matter how perfectly a seed was planted, every season must end. Yet, even as the first frost threatened to kill the garden, old-timers had one last trick to snatch a final massive harvest from the jaws of winter. The final harvest secret. For every gardener, it is the sound of the end, the forecast of the first killing frost. It's a signal to surrender, to admit defeat, and let winter claim what remains of the garden. But our ancestors refused to accept this final loss, and they had one last, brilliant trick to perform an act of magic that seemed to defy the seasons themselves. On the eve of that frost, they would go out to their tomato patch, not with a basket, but with a spade. Instead of picking the dozens of hard, green, unripe tomatoes still clinging to the vines, they would do something shocking. They would carefully dig up the entire plant, roots and all. These full-grown plants were then carried into a cool, dark basement or shed and hung upside down from the rafters. Though severed from the earth, the plant was not yet dead. It still held sugars and life force in its stems and leaves. Over the following weeks, it would perform its final duty, channeling every last bit of its remaining energy into ripening its fruit. One by one, the green tomatoes would blush into a deep, perfect red, providing a slow, steady harvest long into November. It was a final, unexpected gift from a garden that had already given its all. These tricks, from a simple cut to a cosmic rhythm, are more than just ways to grow food. They are a reminder of a deeper wisdom we once held, a knowledge that the secret to abundance lies not in what we buy, but in what we understand. This forgotten wisdom is our shared inheritance, and the more we understand, the more we can grow. If you believe in bringing these old ways back to life, show your support by liking this video and subscribe to our channel so we can continue unearthing these powerful secrets together.